Hey everybody, two Alpha Gals here. I'm Debbie Nichols.
And I'm Candace Mathis, and you're listening to In the Tall Grass, where we're sharing stories of reinvention, resilience, and rediscovering joy.
Whether it's facing Alpha Gal syndrome or any other redefining chapter of life, we all have to learn how to navigate the journey through the tall grass. So here we go. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of our podcast. Today we wanted to do another little tick bite, and I'll tell you what motivated us to do this. So my family was traveling last week. We went down to the Smoky Mountains, which is not real far from where we live, definitely tick country. But, we spent the week down there. We do what we do. We cook and we eat out. Lots of great options for restaurants. Let me tell you, there was no shortage of safe places for me to eat, which was fantastic. But dessert is always sort of a different subject. You know what I mean? Like it's a little harder sometimes to find desserts that are vegan and gluten-free and all these things that I like for my desserts to be, right? To not die.
That is a good thing.
Well, the last day, it was actually the day we were driving home, we stopped in Pigeon Forge, and apparently there was a company called Cinnaholic that was featured on Shark Tank that makes completely vegan baked goods, particularly cinnamon rolls. They are not gluten-free, so I need to clarify that because I do not have a gluten allergy. I just avoid it for the most part. But after watching my whole family this week eating, ice cream out or dessert or, all these wonderful things that they got to have that I was fine on having. I'm really good at making do. I walked into the cinnamon roll store, Cinnaholics, and I was like, so everything you have here is completely vegan. And they were like, it is. No dairy, nothing that's going to kill me. And, I go into my spiel, I have alpha gal syndrome. And actually, this is a little bit embarrassing. But when she confirmed all this is true, I started to cry. I was like, you don't understand. I don't get these types of things regularly, these really indulgent, wonderful treats. And I get to have this right now. So what made me think that this is something we should talk about after coming home? And I was telling Candace about this and we were talking about it. And then she talks about these amazing lemon cupcakes that she bakes for the same reason. I should add, as a nice little treat when typically we have to skip the treats. We wanted to talk about treating yourself because, as we say all the time, living with alpha gal syndrome is all about giving things up. It's all about sacrifice and grieving those things that you love. And yes, we start to reinvent. We start to reintroduce things. We start to adjust to accommodate this like crazy allergy that comes in and jackhammers our life the way that it is. But it's rare. It's rare that we're out and things just sort of fall into place that you can indulge in something like this. And so Candace and I were talking about this condition and how really when you're diagnosed with this, you don't get to decide what you want to eat. The decision is made. It's already sort of been forced on you, right? You're giving up the different types of meats. You're giving up the dairy, which means all the things that are used in baking, the butter and the milk and the cream and all of these things. So in order to figure out how you're going to treat yourself living with this condition, we were talking about it. And the truth is that you have to face your fears. You have got to be willing to get a little bit uncomfortable if you're going to stretch the boundaries of your comfort zone. And this is really hard because it all has to be done safely, right? And so we were talking about what it is that you need to do in order to do this in the safest manner possible.
Right. And it's funny because when you were just talking about Cinnaholic, I actually have seen someone mention that on one of the Facebook Alpha Gal groups, but it made me think about when we traveled to Charleston and I also cried. So there's like no shame at all. I also cried when I got Mabel May's vegan, gluten-free, completely safe desserts. And you know how neurotic I am now about having to take a cooler with me to bring back all of her treats. Totally doing that next time.
But as you're saying this, I'm realizing that there are so many options,
Oh,
really. You just
yeah.
have to find them, right?
Well,
Like we worked in this tight little box when we're first diagnosed, but really the options are out there. You have to figure out what your threshold is, of course.
that's the point, is that we both didn't get to this place just like jumping, right? Like we didn't just do it overnight. We had to take these tiny little baby steps to get to a place of stretching the boundaries of our comfort zone and trying, even if it involved a bit of a risk. I mean, there's a risk in everything that we do, be it traveling outside of our house is a risk, right? Like, but we have to get to that place and be a little uncomfortable, or we're never going to leave our house. And that is an unhealthy place to be. Do you know
That's
what I
right.
mean?
Yes, I think you have to do it with the understanding that you are probably going to fail at times, right? You're going to fail and have a reaction, an alpha-gal reaction. And I don't say that lightly. Like I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here, so to speak. But what I mean is that we're constantly hit with surprises living with alpha-gal syndrome, whether it's accidental exposure or fume reactions. There are so many things out there that are trying to make us react. And I think acknowledging that there's likelihood that you will fail at times and you will have a reaction, whether that's hives or anaphylaxis, but acknowledging that and putting the steps in place in order to deal with that when it does happen makes it a little bit easier to take your fear and face it, to
Right.
push through it versus just staying back to avoid those reactions. Obviously, we want to try to avoid reactions at all costs.
Right.
But when you can figure out where your threshold is and test that threshold so that you can reintroduce delicious things, wonderful things. And I'm not just talking food here. This is about, like you said, just stepping outside the house. You want to figure out where you're comfortable reintroducing these foods or activities into your life where they can come back in a safe way. Like, for example, going to the lake with my friends. I'll do that on occasion every now and then over the summertime. Back in the beginning, I never would have risked going into a restaurant with them, even though the majority of the restaurants at the lake have outdoor seating, but there's still fumes. There's still cross contamination. It's still very, very busy, which makes me think things are going to get crossed. Someone's not going to know that this plate has an allergy, right? I had to figure out where my thresholds were so that I could be comfortable doing that, even if it means, which I did this last weekend, ordering just the house salad, right? Just to avoid, it was very busy, but I was okay, right? I knew I was going to get a delicious coffee on the way home. You know what I mean? Like, you figure out where your threshold is and you push and pull at that where you have to.
Well, and I think that that's a great example, because ultimately the steps that kind of took place in my mind for you to get to that point is you had to break through the fear. You had to walk through it in the beginning, right? Kind of foundationally, we all go through that in this journey. And you established your support system, you established your plan of action, your toolkit. Those things were in place prior to you stepping into that restaurant. So there's a lot of groundwork that gets laid, prior to taking the bigger step. And I think that that is just an important message, I think, in this whole treating yourself, finding the sweet spot. It goes beyond the Cinnabon or the, cupcake or whatever. It's, how do you find that sweet spot? And then how do you take that next step?
Yes, you're not going to jump without a parachute.
Right.
Right? You want that in place. But if what you want to do is jump out of an airplane, you figure out the safest way to do that to minimize risk, right? And obviously there's a huge spectrum of reactivity and severity, and people are dealing with different things. And maybe your step is just to reintroduce bananas when all you've been eating is blueberries. Do you know what I mean? Like, steps look like all different things. It doesn't have to be jumping out of a plane, but with that baby step and stretching the limits of your comfort zone with all of your safeties in place, it's going to make it easier to do it the next time so that you can branch out to mangoes. I don't know.
Right. Right. I mean, we can't live in this place of fear or struggle or survival. We have to, we have to get into a healthy mindset. So whatever that is, to be able to, try a mango. I love that you went to mangoes. It's tackling this at the foundational level. And then, hey, you really actually might be able to eat that mango and make it into a vegan mango cupcake. It seemed really overwhelming to think of baking vegan. Like, how in the world do you bake a cupcake without an egg? But if I hadn't have tried it, I wouldn't have known how delicious it was. Do you know what I mean? So you just can't stay in this space of negativity, or a lot of other things are going to suffer that you might not have foreseen. You got to try something different.
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting too, that in 2019, neither you nor I were thinking of this way at all. No. Right? We lived with this for a while, tested things a lot. As we became comfortable, had a lot of reactions. We still react completely by accident. We can think we're doing every single thing that we can to avoid a reaction, and we will still on occasion have a reaction. So I don't want anybody to think that this just happened overnight for us. It was those baby steps. It was just pushing the boundaries. It was making sure that all of our safety nets were in place. And the more that I've done it, and I don't know, I think I probably do know the answer to this from you, but the more that I've done it, the more comfortable I am with testing those boundaries, right? And I'm much more likely to try something new that's almost definitely safe now than I would have been in just reintroducing something new, right? Because when you first get that diagnosis, it is overwhelming, and it is terrifying to think that you could accidentally put something in your body that's going to send you to the ER. But, with time comes figuring it out some. And now, I get excited when I see a vegan bakery. Yeah. And for the record, it was delicious. It was so good. It was so sweet. I had to eat it in like 3 shifts because I just don't get that kind of sugar anymore. Although all this talk about your vegan lemon cupcakes has me craving a little bit. So we might have to have a baking date.
Let's do it. So we encourage you, take the step, go treat yourself, find the sweet spot. Have a great, great day. Thank you for joining us today on In the Tall Grass. Visit us at 2alphagals.com. That's TWOalphagals.com. Or you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at 2alphagals. If you enjoyed listening, please leave a review and help us grow this community.
We're all faced with obstacles on our journey, whether it be food allergies or tick-borne diseases. You might outgrow the reactions, but you won't outgrow the person you become. Ticks suck, but life doesn't have to.